Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmakers over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. We see in the video. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So it's like that. So because the Egyptian people are afraid, they oppressed the Hebrew people, they make them work as slaves. But you know how it is like when there's oppression, faith continues to grow. I think if you hear about the testimony from our pastors and even our ministers who are in China, sometimes they welcome the oppression, because the more they get oppressed, the greater the growth of the underground churches is happening. So it's like this also. The Israelites were being oppressed, and the more they are oppressed, the more they multiply and the more they spread. So then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and set them on the birth stool, if it's a son, you shall kill him. But if it's a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwife said to the Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. I don't know if that's true, but maybe there's some truth to it, some of it. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwife feared God, he gave them families. And the Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrew, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So the king, or the Pharaoh at that time, has two plans to limit the growth of the population of the Hebrews. The first one was to ask the midwives. The midwives are the ladies who are helping pregnant women give birth, that if it's a boy, kill the baby boy. And if it's a girl, then you shall let the newborn girl live. But they didn't follow the king. And then the second plan for the king was, if any Egyptian saw a boy, a young boy, he will, 2 years old and lower, something like that, he will have to throw the boy and drown him in the Nile River. So now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when he saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. So Moses was born into the tribe of Levi. So you know, the Levites are the priestly tribe. They are the people eventually, later on in Exodus, they are the ones that were tasked to minister into the temple and to minister to the Israelite, being that mediator between God and the Israelite people. So there was persecution when Moses was born, and it was that environment and he was born. So the first point that I want to share with you is great faith takes great risk. So in the story in Exodus, there's a few people who have demonstrated this great faith. The first two are the midwives. You know, at that time, if the king says something or the Pharaoh says something, it's the law of the land. And anybody who disobeys the law will immediately sentenced to death. And that's true even the time when these midwives are all obviously not following what the king is already ruled as the law of the land. And then second, his parents, Amram is the father and Jochebed is the mother. They also demonstrate great faith by taking this risk again of disobeying the king. Because if they were following the law, I mean, if Shipra or Pua were the one who was one of them helped Jochebed gave birth, then following the king means they will have to kill Moses, the baby Moses. And then that didn't happen. And then Jochebed and Amram, if they're afraid of the king, they will also would have killed Moses. And that didn't happen. So again, during that time, the Israelite people are already, there's a growing faith that's happening in them to the point of disobedience to the existing law, disobedient to the regulation of the king. And how does it apply to us? If you look around, this issue of abortion, this issue of this, there's so many issues with this divorce and all those, drug use and all those. There will be a time when the government will rule in favor of some of this. And as Christians, we may be asked to comment or say something. And we should be able to say something based on our conviction, which is based on what is biblically true. Okay, so great faith is taking risk to honor God as king over any earthly authorities. So what we hear, so Jochebed and Amram are Moses' parents. And this is my message to the parents. The kind we may not be able to pass to our children, salvation, our faith, we cannot even pass them our faith. But we can demonstrate to them the kind of faith that we would want our children to have. So let's make sure that our children or your future children will be able to see in you the kind of faith that is alive, the kind of faith that allows you to take risks, the kind of faith that allows you to live a life that is joyful, that is happy, that is always looking forward despite of all the challenges that is all around us. Hopefully the kind of faith that our children will see is not like this very religious, just going to church, but not being able, but them not seeing us. How do we actually live our faith in our daily life? So again, so what Amram and Jochebed demonstrated that it's the same thing what the words of the apostle said in the New Testament. We must obey God rather than men. And also, so after, it will be very difficult to hide a baby for 3 months. Because the baby, when they're hungry, they will cry. When they feel uncomfortable, they will cry. So no matter what you do, babies will cry. That's one of the best way for them to communicate that they need attention or they need something. So it's their only way to communicate. So sometimes there's a Christmas song that says that when the baby Jesus was born, he never made a sound. I think that's totally ridiculous. The only way a human baby will communicate is through crying. So how can you effectively hide a baby? Crying. During that time, the houses are made of bricks or clay. And there's no acoustics. I mean, the acoustics technology is not yet available. You cannot create a room that's so soundproof that every time the baby Moses will cry, everybody will just bring the baby inside and nobody will hear outside. But for 3 months, they were able to do that. They risked their lives. Because the moment this baby cried, and there's happened to be Egyptian soldiers walking outside, that's doomed for baby Moses. But I think it came to a point that hiding the baby becomes very difficult. So just read in Exodus 2. When she could not hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of both rushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river bank. So you know the story, right? So Moses' mother prepared this basket. When I talk about Noah in the past, it's the same word that the Jew used for the ark. It's the same word that was used for this basket that that Moses was put inside. So waterproof it and make sure that it floats, and put the baby inside and put it in the Nile River. So that's also an act of faith. Putting your baby in a basket and let that basket float in the Nile River, because there's so many bad things that can happen. When you put the basket with the baby on a running water in a big river like the Nile. So that's an act of faith. Moses' mother believed that this baby is special and he has a great destiny for the people of Israel. And so by doing that, she trusts God, that God will protect Moses. So the story goes, so now the daughter of the Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse for the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" So, again, the midwives, Moses' parents, even Moses' sister Miriam, demonstrated great faith by taking risk. So when the daughter of the Pharaoh saw the basket, she approached the daughter of the Pharaoh and even volunteered, "Should I look for a woman to nurse this baby for you?" So that's a risk, because she could have been killed also. He could be arrested for approaching. You know, there's protocol. When you approach a royalty, there's protocol on how things need to be done. Like, I heard that if you stand in front of the Queen of England, or the Queen of England, there's a way of how you bow, how you walk, going forward, how you walk, getting out of the room. So there's protocol. In approaching a royalty, remember the story of Esther. She cannot just go, even if she's the queen, she cannot just go inside the chamber of the king without being called, or else she can be sentenced to die. So there's protocol. And then this Miriam, Moses' daughter, she approached the daughter of the Pharaoh. And that time, there's nobody guarding the daughter except this young woman that's her assistant. So even Miriam, Moses' sister, demonstrate that kind of faith that they risk. Okay, let me continue. So, let me read in Acts 7:21 to 22. And when he was exposed, meaning when she was able to be away from a nursing mother, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up to be as her own son. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptian, and he was mighty in his words and deeds. So, you know, sometimes you may look at it as a tragic story, but you know, that time Egypt was the center of the earth, meaning the most advanced agriculture is being practiced in Egypt at that time. All advancement in agriculture, in machinery, and even, we saw in the video, it was the time that Egypt was building all these gigantic structures. This is the time that they were building the pyramids and all these very big structure. So Moses ended up in the Pharaoh's household, and that's how the Lord arranged him, that he received the finest education available to any human being at that time. So Egypt was at the center of great knowledge, great education, just like how Alexandria will be several hundred years later. So, do you know why it's important for Moses to receive that kind of education? Do you know? Do you have any idea? He has to have that kind of education so he is able to write the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, in a manner that can withstand the test of time. So he was given a real education, and his mother, his adopted mother, had high hopes that one day Moses would become a leader in the Egyptian government, perhaps even becoming the king over all the Jews. The historian said that at that time the Pharaoh has no son. The Pharaoh has only a daughter. And hence, the next ruler will be the daughter, and the son of that daughter is Moses. So Moses will be in the succession in line for being the future ruler of Egypt. But Moses, so great faith, second point, great faith makes risky decisions. So, but Moses, when he has grown up, he refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh. And he made his first risky decision, as mentioned in Exodus. So one day, when Moses has grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And then Acts also, Stephen in the New Testament also mentioned this. When he was 40 years old, it came to his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his brother would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand, but they did not understand. That was his first risky decision. His first decision was he identified himself not as an Egyptian, but a Hebrew. I think he probably knew growing up, because he looked different. The color of his skin was probably different than the Egyptian household. So he knew. And you know how it's like when you started looking, I think in one of, there are nations in this world where people get discriminated because of skin color. Because it's one of the things that's very obvious. You can immediately know that someone is different by the color of the skin. And Moses probably realized that. How come my skin color doesn't look like my mother and the rest of this kingdom, the household in the palace, compared to the slaves that are being treated harshly? So he identified himself as a Hebrew, but then the action that he did is not a good testimony to the kind of faith that we want to have. So I think one point that I want to make sure, walking by faith is not doing the right thing our way, it is doing the right thing God's way. It's always important that we don't judge between right and wrong by our own judgment. We always go back to the Word of God. So sometimes there's question on is it right or wrong. I think the better question to ask is which decision is righteous, which action is righteous. And it centers, it goes back to what the will of God will be or what God would want us to do. So the killing of the Egyptian immediately communicated that Moses cared about the Hebrew people, which meant he has now become an enemy of the Pharaoh. So because in Exodus 2:15, when the Pharaoh heard of it, He sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the Pharaoh, stayed in the land of Midian. He sat down by the well. So it's easy to pass over this section thinking that Moses just simply rejected the life of sin for the life of righteousness. It's easy to say that, I think Moses made a better choice because he's living a life of sin and he's now going to live a life of righteousness, because it means that the moment he identified himself as a Hebrew, he has to live living in the palace. But actually, no. I think it's very simplistic to look at it that way, that he's choosing life of righteousness over life of sin. At that time, being in the household of the Pharaoh, it means the best comfort in the world, the best food in the world, all the luxuries in the world, those are in his disposal. If in the modern times, we will say that Moses made it. He's driving a Ferrari. He's living in this most. He has so many apartments or many buildings that he owns. He parties with all the rich and the rich. He is like that. We can tell that among the Hebrews, he is the most successful Hebrew at that time. He's rubbing elbows with the Pharaoh and the prime ministers and all these government officials. And everywhere he goes, people will be paying him respect because he is part of the ruling family. So he decided to identify with the Hebrew and said, I'm willing to live a life and being treated like a slave, like every Hebrew at that time, because I believe because there's something that he saw, there's something that he knew, and that's why he's able to decide to get away from that. So there's a parallel between the fleeting pleasures of sin in verse 25 and the treasures of Egypt in verse 26. So Moses rejected huge amount of riches. He could have remained in the lap of luxury and had the easy life being called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He had position and prestige, and he refused all that because he's going to be God's servant. So faith means that we do not make decisions based upon the things of the world. So faithful living is not making life decisions based upon a need for money, a need for work, or whatever reason that you have. Faith is trusting God to take care of that because we are making decisions to serve God. That's what God did. That's what Moses did, and God took care of it. So last point. Great faith requires brave action. So by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he enjoyed seeing him who is invisible. So the writers of Hebrew points out the bravery of Moses to stand against the Pharaoh. So Moses did it in a many number of occasions. So he did it early when he helped the Hebrew in striking down the Egyptian. And then he returned to Egypt. You know, he was a fugitive. He is a wanted man in Egypt for killing an Egyptian. But he risked being arrested because God told him, come back and free my people. He risked being arrested and stand in front of the Pharaoh and ask the Pharaoh, you have to let the Israelites go. And he came back many times. You know, the 10 plagues that happened, every time he has to come, then he has to confront the Pharaoh. He stands bravely in front of the Pharaoh. So why is that? What made Moses endure and all these things, and what made him take this brave action? Because he endured by seeing him who is invisible. So if you look, Hebrews 11:1 starts, now faith is the assurance for things hoped for, the convictions of things not seen. Faith is seeing the unseen. So in terms of Moses, faith is bolstered in seeing the unseen God. So if you look at, I think there's a verse in the middle of Hebrews that says, these all died in faith, not having received the thing promised, but having seen them and viewed them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. So the heroes of the faith in Hebrews did not receive the promise. They didn't see the actual promise happening, but they saw them from afar and greeted them. They saw the unseen. God was with them, and God was keeping His word to them. So this is the faith that all Christians who have died for the cause of Christ have had. They are also the blessings of God as more valuable. So Romans 8:18 said, "For I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." So we are exhorted to keep our eyes on Jesus, in the same way that the years of the faith have obtained a testimony of faith that led to many others having opportunity to meet the author and perfecter of our faith, Christ. So the reward that the Apostle Paul speaks about as the price of the higher calling, I press on forward the goal for the prize of the upward call of Jesus, of call of God in Christ Jesus. That those of us who are mature think this way, and if anything you think otherwise, God will reveal also to you. So the heroes of the faith, like Moses, the ultimate reward is not being able to bring the people of Israel into the promised land, or the land of Canaan. Just as the ultimate reward for Abraham is not having physical children that outnumber the stars. So the ultimate reward is being counted righteous before our God and Father. So I pray that may we not just seek temporary rewards for our eternal Father. So let me end by sharing some similarities between Moses and Jesus. Although we know that there's no way Moses can compare to Jesus. Moses is like a cockroach compared to Jesus, something like that. So but let me say some of these things, right? So both Moses and Jesus, when they were a baby, their lives were threatened by an order of the king, by an order of the Pharaoh. So it was the Pharaoh in the life of Moses, and it was King Herod in the time of Jesus. There was a rule that says kill all baby or young boy 2 years and young during Jesus' time. So they were spared from the king edict. So Moses felt the comfort and riches of living in the Pharaoh's castle or house. Jesus, in the same way, when he chose to become a man, he left the wonderful and the glorious things or riches that are in him being in heaven. He left that the same way. So Jesus left heaven to become a human being. Both of them obeyed God's will. And it's for Moses to go back to the Pharaoh and bring the people out of Egypt. For Jesus, it is obeying God's will to the point of death. Remember his prayer in the garden, like hours before he was arrested. Take this cup away from me, but not my will, but your will. So he prayed that. He obeyed Moses and Jesus. They both obeyed the will of God. And finally, Moses brought the slaves, the Hebrews, from slavery to freedom in the land of Canaan. In the same way when Jesus died on the cross, he provided freedom to those who will believe in him. Freedom from the shackles of sin, and freedom to be able to live a full life here on earth, and freedom to join him in heaven. So I think Moses, if you recall, there was a time when Jesus was transfigured, and at that time, when Jesus was transfigured, There are two people who showed up with him in the mountain, Moses and Elijah. So Moses represents the law, and Elijah represented the prophet. So when Jesus was transfigured, he's communicating to those who are with him, like Peter, James, and John, that the Old Testament points to the coming Messiah, who is Jesus Christ. So every time we read the Old Testament, we should be able to see everything points out to Jesus, of what Jesus is going to do and what Jesus is able to do in our lives. So let's always remember that Jesus came down, he was saved from King Herod, he grew up, he left heaven to be here on earth, he obeyed God's will even to the point of death. But he rose up, and now he's in heaven, and we look forward to the day that we will see him again face to face. So let's make sure that we have Jesus in our lives, who can provide this freedom, who can provide this assurance that we'll be able to see him face to face when he comes up or when we die and join him in heaven. Let us close our eyes and pray. Lord, thank you. Thank you so much for the great love that you showed and expressed to us through the lives of Jesus. Lord, thank you for the great heroes that we have, that we've been going through in our Great Faith series. Lord, thank you for the life of Moses. Lord, thank you for the story, the history actually, the written history that documented how Moses was able to demonstrate great faith. Faith that is visible in the decisions, and faith that is visible in the actions. And Lord, help us to be like Moses. Help us to have this kind of faith that are visible in the decisions that we make and in the actions that we take. Increase our faith and our trust in you, Lord. Make our lives matter as you build your kingdom here on earth. Bless us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.